Welcome, viewers, to Nuclear Illinois. This may come as a shock to many of you, but Illinois has more nuclear reactors than any other state in the United States. 14 total, with 11 operating. We're number one. Exelon's nuclear plants generate more high-level nuclear waste and have more waste sitting on site at the reactors than any other state. Illinois also has the world's busiest airport at O'Hare Field, less than 30 minutes normal flight time to all 14 of our Illinois reactors, plus 3 across Lake Michigan in western Michigan. This is a fact of great importance in the post-9/11 world that we live in. With global warming kicking in for real, repeated energy crises, the nuclear industry is positioning itself for a comeback, what it calls a nuclear renaissance. But some people think this is more of a relapse than a renaissance. Today's guest is a long-standing observer, analyst, and critic of the nuclear industry, both in the United States and worldwide. With the nuclear industry trying for a comeback, and Exelon making plans to build new reactors in central Illinois and Texas, what he has to say has far greater significance for you viewers than the White Sox not making the playoffs. I'd like to introduce Dr. Arjun Makhijani, President of the Institute for Energy and Environmental Research in Tacoma Park, Maryland. Welcome today.
Hi, Dave. Now you put me in competition with the White Sox.
Well, given their play at the end of the season, it's a wash. No problem.
Okay.
So, for the viewers, just give a little background on the Institute and how long you've been involved with the issue.
Yeah, I've been involved in energy issues personally since 1970. So I was around before the first energy crisis and the oil embargo of 1973. I worked on the Energy Policy Project. The Institute is sort of younger than my involvement in the issue. We started working on energy and environmental issues in the beginning of 1987, so almost 20 years. We're based in Tacoma Park, Maryland, just outside of Washington, D.C. And we've done lots of studies, books, reports. We recently produced a book, Insurmountable Risks, The Dangers of Using Nuclear Power to Combat Global Climate Change. It was just published this year to address the very issue you want to talk about. Mm-hmm. So we've also done a lot of work on nuclear weapons, proliferation, safeguarding nuclear facilities, worrying about terrorist attacks on spent fuel pools and how we might store irradiated material better at nuclear reactors so the dangers are not as great. So we've done a variety of things.
Mm-hmm. I think energy is one of those issues that folks really don't think much about because it's magic. You flip a switch, a light goes on. They don't consider what it takes to get there. But for our way of thinking in many instances, it's the one resource that separates us from the Roman Empire. I mean, they've had roads, they had running water, they had baths, but energy seems to be, and to paraphrase Bill Clinton, it's the energy stupid that, and who controls energy controls society. And that gets us to the nuclear issue. Nuclear has been around a long time, but it really has been stalled for a number of decades. What, in your experience, has been the problems with nuclear power as an energy resource for electricity?
Yeah, well, nuclear power wasn't really born as an economic technology or the idea that it would be economical, although in the initial days, you know, the chairman of the Atomic Energy Commission said it would one day be too cheap to meter. That was propaganda. And they called it propaganda at the time. That's not a judgment I'm making about what they did. They were really trying to put a softer face to thermonuclear weapons. Eisenhower was very upset before he spoke in the United Nations. He didn't want to be so negative about nuclear war and so on. So he gave his Atoms for Peace speech, and that somehow if you forgo nuclear weapons, you'll have this wonderful bounty. And there was an 18-month propaganda campaign following that. The first nuclear reactor was built in the United States, was very expensive. People did know at the time. We produced another book called Nuclear Power Deception about that. We looked at all the studies that were done at the time as to whether nuclear would be cheap or expensive. All the studies said it would be expensive in the 1950s. Atomic Energy Commission, industry. And so here we are half a century later, and nuclear power still requires subsidies. For a period, they did build cheap reactors. But those reactors, as was shown by the 3 Mile Island accident, did not have adequate safety systems. There was a scandal in the late 60s and early 70s around core cooling systems. If the cooling system failed? Was there an adequate backup that would prevent a meltdown? So by the time of 3 Mile Island, the industry was already in trouble. The costs were going up, then the interest rates went up, the safety concerns were growing, and nuclear power was killed in that phase more by Wall Street than by Main Street. There was a big bond default in the early 1980s. Chemical Bank went under in New York. Wall Street doesn't like to see their banks go under. And so the financing of nuclear power got very, very difficult. And so nuclear power plants started getting canceled. There was much financial distress in the industry. And so Main Street was also pretty happy because most people don't want nuclear power plants in their neighborhood, but we all want a reliable electricity supply.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So historically, money's been one of the problems. What would be the 2 or 3 other salient problems that you've identified over the years with nuclear?
Well, there are a couple of other issues. In the early days, it was thought that a non-fuel part of radioactive material called uranium-238 could be converted into plutonium. So we'd have nuclear power forever and ever in a special type of reactor called a breeder reactor. But once you deploy those kinds of reactors, you have proliferation risks because you have to separate plutonium.
Proliferation of?
So when that technology is deployed, then the people who have that technology will have plutonium because it goes with the territory. They'll be able to make bombs out of a system that was really designed to generate commercial nuclear power. So one of the things that happened in the interim was that the concerns that if nuclear technology spreads, especially plutonium technology and uranium enrichment, what the United States currently doesn't like Iran to have, for instance, then a lot of countries will get nuclear weapons and this would be a risk. So Presidents Ford and Carter in the 70s put a stop to plutonium separation technology for fuel purposes. So that was one of the things that happened. The concerns about the bomb spreading as a result of commercial nuclear technology grew a great deal. The second problem in the late 70s arose in California, where the Public Utility Commission over there was very concerned that the costs to the ratepayers of taking care of nuclear waste would go up, and there was nowhere to put it. It's very dangerous stuff. It has a lot of plutonium in it. It has a lot of highly radioactive materials in it. And they forbade the construction of new nuclear power plants until the spent fuel could go somewhere from there. That led to the Nuclear Waste Policy Act. The government said, yes, we'll take care of it. The federal government said that. We'll build a deep geologic repository. We'll take all this radioactive material and put it deep underground. Well, they promised to do it by 1998, January 31st. And here we are, 2006, and there is, as yet, no movement of spent fuel. Now they're saying 2017, maybe the repository in Nevada is in deep trouble. So that has turned out to be a big problem. And then, of course, Chernobyl was a big problem.
So the big ones that you've mentioned then, you have the waste issue, of course, the proliferation issue, and then the threat of a major accident, which is where you're heading with Chernobyl.
Right.
Now,